Welcome to IELTS Self-Peep MasterPrep, your trusted source for real exam-based practice tests. Every test you see here is inspired by current exam trends, and each one comes with full model solutions to help you master every section. Here's our daily schedule. IELTS tests drop every morning at 7:30 a.m. Eastern, and CLP tests every evening at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. No matter which exam you're preparing for, we've got you covered every single day. Are you ready for today's test? Give it your best shot and comment your score. The top 5 scorers will be featured in our monthly Achievers newsletter and awards. Want your name included? Let's begin.
Do you enjoy doing any creative activities in your free time?
Yes, I like drawing pictures when I have free time. I usually draw simple things like flowers or animals. I started this hobby when I was in school and I still enjoy it now. It helps me feel relaxed after a long day of work or studying.
Yes, I'm quite fond of sketching portraits in my spare time. I picked up this hobby a few years ago after watching some online tutorials, and I've been practicing regularly ever since. I find it incredibly therapeutic, especially after a demanding day. It allows me to express myself in ways that words sometimes cannot, which is something I truly value.
Absolutely, I'm really passionate about watercolor painting, which is something I stumbled upon almost by accident during a community workshop several years ago. What initially began as a casual pastime has gradually evolved into a deeply fulfilling creative outlet. I find the entire process remarkably meditative, from selecting the color palette to watching the pigments blend on paper. It genuinely allows me to switch off from the pressures of daily life and tap into a more imaginative side of myself.
Do you think children should learn art at school? Why or why not?
Yes, I think children should learn art at school because it is good for them. Art can help children use their imagination and think in different ways. Also, some children are not good at subjects like maths, so art gives them a chance to do well in something else.
I definitely believe art should be part of the school curriculum. It encourages children to think outside the box and develop their creative thinking skills, which are increasingly important in today's world. Moreover, not every child excels academically, so having art as a subject provides an alternative avenue for them to build confidence and discover hidden talents they might not otherwise uncover.
Without a doubt, I'm a strong advocate for incorporating art into the school curriculum from an early age. Beyond the obvious benefit of nurturing creativity, exposure to artistic disciplines cultivates critical thinking, emotional intelligence, and the ability to approach problems from unconventional angles. Furthermore, in an education system that can be overwhelmingly focused on academic performance, art offers a much-needed breathing space where children who may struggle with traditional subjects can truly flourish and develop a sense of self-worth.
Has the way people create art changed compared to the past?
Yes, I think art has changed a lot. In the past, people used traditional things like paint and brushes. But now, many people use computers and tablets to make art. Also, people can share their art on the internet, which was not possible before. So technology has really changed art.
Oh, undoubtedly. Technology has completely transformed the way people produce art. Whereas artists previously relied solely on physical materials such as canvases and oil paints, nowadays digital tools like graphic design software and drawing tablets have opened up entirely new possibilities. On top of that, social media platforms have made it far easier for artists to showcase their work to a global audience, which has democratized the creative process significantly.
The transformation has been nothing short of remarkable, I'd say. Historically, artistic creation was largely confined to traditional mediums, oil painting, sculpture, charcoal sketching and the like, and was often accessible only to those with formal training or patronage. Fast forward to today, and the landscape has shifted dramatically. Digital platforms and sophisticated software have essentially dismantled the barriers to entry, enabling virtually anyone with a smartphone to experiment with creative expression. Moreover, the rise of artificial intelligence in art has sparked fascinating debates about authorship and originality, which I find particularly thought-provoking.
What do you usually do to stay healthy?
To stay healthy, I try to exercise regularly. I usually go jogging in the park near my house 2 or 3 times a week. I also try to eat healthy food like vegetables and fruit. I think these simple habits are important for keeping my body in good condition.
I make a conscious effort to maintain a fairly active lifestyle. I tend to go for a run several mornings a week, and I've recently taken up swimming as well, which I find is excellent for both cardiovascular fitness and mental clarity. In terms of diet, I try to cook balanced meals at home rather than relying on takeaway food, as I've noticed it makes a real difference to my overall energy levels throughout the day.
I take a fairly holistic approach to staying healthy, to be honest. On the physical side, I maintain a consistent exercise routine that includes a mix of strength training and distance running, which I find complements each other nicely. I'm also quite mindful about nutrition. I meal prep at the weekends to ensure I'm fueling my body with wholesome, nutrient-dense foods during the working week. Beyond the physical, though, I've become increasingly aware of the importance of mental well-being, so I've incorporated mindfulness meditation into my daily routine, which has been genuinely transformative in managing stress.
Do you think people today are more health conscious than in the past?
Yes, I think people today care more about health than before. Many people now go to the gym and eat organic food. Also, there is a lot of information about health on the internet and social media. So people know more about what is good or bad for their body compared to the past.
On the whole, I'd say there's definitely been a noticeable shift towards greater health awareness in recent years. People are far more informed about things like the dangers of processed food and the benefits of regular exercise, largely thanks to the wealth of information available online. Having said that, it's somewhat ironic that despite this increased awareness, lifestyle-related conditions like obesity and anxiety seem to be on the rise, which suggests that knowledge alone isn't always enough.
That's an interesting question. On the surface, it would certainly appear that contemporary society is far more health conscious than previous generations. There's been an explosion of wellness culture, from fitness influencers and clean eating movements to the widespread popularity of wearable health trackers. However, I think it's worth questioning whether this heightened awareness has genuinely translated into better health outcomes across the board. In many ways, the commercialization of wellness has created a rather paradoxical situation where people are bombarded with conflicting health advice, which can actually lead to anxiety and unhealthy obsessions rather than genuine well-being.
Is there anything you would like to change about your daily routine to be healthier?
Yes, I would like to sleep more because I usually go to bed quite late. I know that sleep is very important for health, but I often watch videos or use my phone at night. I also want to drink more water during the day because I sometimes forget to do that.
There are a couple of things I'd love to improve, actually. Firstly, I'd like to establish a more consistent sleep schedule, as I have a terrible habit of staying up far too late scrolling through my phone, which I know is detrimental to the quality of my rest. Secondly, I'd like to reduce my screen time in general and spend more time outdoors, particularly at weekends, as I feel that would do wonders for both my physical and mental health.
If I'm being completely candid, there are certainly areas where I could do better. The most pressing one would be improving my sleep hygiene. I have a rather counterproductive tendency to reach for my phone just before bed, which inevitably leads to mindless scrolling and disrupted sleep patterns. Beyond that, I've been meaning to incorporate more stretching and mobility work into my mornings, as I spend a disproportionate amount of time sitting at a desk, which is taking a toll on my posture. Ultimately, I think it comes down to exercising greater discipline with small, everyday choices, which is easier said than done but would undoubtedly yield significant long-term benefits.
Please begin speaking now.
I'd like to talk about my uncle, who has been a really important influence in my life. He is my mother's older brother and he works as a science teacher at a secondary school. I have known him since I was born, obviously, but he became more important to me when I was about 12 years old. At that time, I was not very interested in studying and my grades were quite bad. My uncle started to spend time with me at weekends, and he would take me to museums and science exhibitions. He made learning feel exciting and not boring like it was at school. He also taught me to be patient and to not give up when things are difficult. Because of him, I started to work harder and my grades improved a lot. I think he influenced me because he never forced me to study. Instead, he showed me that knowledge is something valuable. He is still someone I look up to very much today.
I'd like to describe my maternal grandmother, who has undoubtedly been the most significant influence in my life. She's now in her late 70s, and although she never had the opportunity to attend university herself, she's one of the wisest people I've ever encountered. Growing up, I spent a great deal of time at her house, particularly during school holidays, and it was during those formative years that she shaped my character in countless ways. What stands out most is her unwavering emphasis on treating others with kindness, regardless of their background or circumstances. She would often share stories from her own childhood, which was marked by considerable hardship, and through these anecdotes, she taught me the value of resilience and gratitude. Moreover, she instilled in me a deep appreciation for education, constantly reminding me that learning opens doors that nothing else can. I believe her influence has been so profound because she led by example rather than simply offering advice. Watching her navigate life's challenges with such grace and determination gave me a tangible model to aspire to, and I genuinely credit her with shaping the person I am today.
I'd like to talk about a former literature teacher of mine, Mrs. Hargreaves, who left an indelible mark on my personal and intellectual development. I first encountered her when I enrolled in her advanced English class at the age of 16, and from the very outset, her approach to teaching struck me as remarkably different from anything I had previously experienced. Rather than adhering to conventional methods of rote memorization and formulaic essay writing, she actively encouraged us to engage critically with texts, to question established interpretations, and to articulate our own perspectives with conviction. What made her influence particularly transformative was her genuine investment in each student's growth. She had an extraordinary ability to identify individual strengths and nurture them, often tailoring her feedback to push us beyond our perceived limitations. In my case, she recognized a latent passion for creative writing that I myself had been largely unaware of, and she provided me with the encouragement and constructive criticism necessary to develop it. Beyond the academic sphere, she modeled intellectual humility and curiosity in a way that profoundly altered how I approached the world. She demonstrated that admitting uncertainty is not a weakness but rather the foundation of genuine understanding. I consider her influence pivotal because it extended far beyond the classroom, fundamentally reshaping my values, my ambitions, and my relationship with learning itself.
In what ways do you think the role of teachers, as influencers, has changed compared to the past?
I think teachers were more important in the past because students didn't have internet or many books. The teacher was the main person who gave knowledge. But nowadays, students can find information online by themselves, so teachers are not the only source of learning. However, I still think teachers are important because they can guide students and help them understand difficult things. Also, in the past, teachers were more strict and students respected them more, but now the relationship is more friendly.
I believe the role of teachers has evolved quite considerably over recent decades. In the past, teachers were primarily seen as authoritative figures who transmitted knowledge in a largely one-directional manner, and students were expected to absorb information somewhat passively. Nowadays, however, with the advent of technology and the vast amount of information available online, teachers have increasingly taken on the role of facilitators rather than sole providers of knowledge. Their influence now extends beyond academic content to encompass critical thinking skills and emotional intelligence. That said, I would argue that their capacity to inspire and motivate remains as vital as it ever was, even if the methods have changed.
I think the transformation has been quite multifaceted. Historically, teachers occupied an almost unassailable position of authority within their communities. They were custodians of knowledge in an era when access to information was severely limited, and their word carried enormous weight. In contemporary society, however, that dynamic has shifted dramatically, largely owing to the democratization of information through digital technology. Students can now independently verify, supplement, or even challenge what they are taught in the classroom, which has inevitably altered the power balance. Consequently, the most effective teachers today are those who have adapted by positioning themselves not as gatekeepers of facts but as mentors who cultivate analytical thinking, intellectual curiosity, and emotional resilience. Interestingly, I would argue that this shift has actually elevated the importance of the teacher's interpersonal influence, as the purely informational aspect of their role can increasingly be fulfilled by other means.
Do you think people are more influenced by their peers or by older generations? Why?
I think it depends on the age of the person. When people are young, like teenagers, they are more influenced by their friends because they want to fit in and be accepted. They copy what their friends wear and listen to the same music. But when people get older, I think they start to appreciate the advice from older people more, like their parents or grandparents. So I would say peers are more influential for young people and older generations are more influential for adults.
This is quite a nuanced issue, and I think the answer largely depends on the stage of life a person is at. During adolescence and early adulthood, peer influence tends to be particularly potent, as young people are in the process of forming their identities and are naturally drawn to those who share their experiences and perspectives. There's a strong desire to belong, which makes individuals especially susceptible to the attitudes and behaviors of their contemporaries. However, as people mature, they often develop a greater appreciation for the wisdom that comes with lived experience, and the guidance of older generations tends to carry more weight. Personally, I believe the most well-rounded individuals are those who manage to strike a balance, drawing on the energy and innovation of their peers whilst valuing the accumulated knowledge of their elders.
I think this is a genuinely complex question that defies a straightforward answer, as the nature and degree of influence varies enormously depending on cultural context, individual temperament, and life stage. In broadly collectivist societies, for instance, the wisdom and authority of older generations tend to exert a more sustained and pervasive influence throughout a person's life, with filial piety and respect for elders deeply embedded in social norms. Conversely, in more individualistic cultures, peer influence can be overwhelmingly dominant, particularly during formative years when identity construction is most active. What I find particularly fascinating is the interplay between the two. In many cases, the values instilled by older generations form a subconscious foundation upon which peer interactions build. So whilst it might appear on the surface that peers hold greater sway, especially in the age of social media where horizontal influence is amplified enormously, the deeper, more enduring influence often traces back to intergenerational transmission. Ultimately, I suspect both forces operate simultaneously, though in different registers and at different levels of consciousness.
How important is it for public figures, such as politicians or celebrities, to be positive role models?
I think it is very important for public figures to be good role models because many people, especially young people, look up to them. For example, if a famous singer behaved badly, their fans might think it is okay to do the same thing. Politicians should also be role models because they represent the country and make important decisions. However, some people say that celebrities are just entertainers and they don't have a responsibility to be role models. I partly agree with this, but I still think they should try to be positive.
I believe this is an issue of considerable importance, particularly in today's media-saturated world where public figures are under constant scrutiny. Politicians, in my view, have a clear obligation to model ethical behavior, as they hold positions of trust and their actions directly affect public policy and societal values. If those in power are seen to act with dishonesty or self-interest, it inevitably breeds cynicism and erodes public confidence in institutions. As for celebrities, whilst some argue that they never ask to be role models, the reality is that their visibility affords them enormous influence, particularly over impressionable younger audiences. With that influence comes a degree of responsibility, whether they welcome it or not. That said, I think we should be cautious about placing unrealistic expectations on individuals simply because they happen to be in the public eye. After all, they are human beings with flaws like everyone else.
This is a question that sits at the intersection of personal freedom and social responsibility, and I think it warrants careful consideration from multiple angles. On one hand, there is a compelling argument that public figures, by virtue of their elevated visibility and reach, bear a heightened responsibility to conduct themselves in ways that set a constructive example. This is particularly true of politicians, whose behavior arguably shapes not only public discourse but the very fabric of democratic norms. When leaders normalize dishonesty or divisiveness, the repercussions reverberate throughout society in profoundly damaging ways. Celebrities occupy a somewhat different position, as their influence tends to be cultural rather than institutional, yet the impact can be equally far-reaching, especially given the parasocial relationships that social media fosters between public figures and their followers. However, I think it is worth interrogating the assumption that underlies this expectation. Demanding that individuals serve as moral exemplars simply because they possess a talent or hold office risks creating a rather reductive framework in which we outsource moral guidance to figures who may be ill-equipped to provide it. A more nuanced approach might involve fostering media literacy and critical thinking in the general public, so that people are better equipped to evaluate the behavior of public figures independently rather than absorbing it uncritically.
Before you go, don't forget to like this video, share it with other test takers, and subscribe so you never miss your daily IELTS and CELPEEP tests. Drop your score in the comments. Your name could be featured in our monthly Achievers newsletter. Stay consistent, stay focused, and keep leveling up with MasterPrep.